have an incoming interview with Mike Stubbs. He is Lord Mike Stubbs. He is the king of the airwaves and ruler of the microphone. He is known for his historic game-winning goal calls for the London Knights. He can be heard blowing speakers off cars on AM 980 radio. Enjoy the interview.
Glove and across the Oshawa blue line. Steklov gets in behind the Oshawa net, pass up front. Here is Booty, scores! Liam Booty! Knights lead 1-0.
Mike Stubbs, how you doing?
Hey, pretty good, Chris. How are you?
I'm okay. I'm kind of getting into this amateur stuff because I have nothing to do right now. The hockey players are doing nothing. So I figured I want to reach out to you first and have you be the first.
Yeah, no, it's awesome.
So I just want to kind of get into things and see how you've been doing during the coronavirus with the quarantine and isolation. How has life been with you for that?
You know what? It's been different. I think it's been different for everybody. It's also shown how certain things can work. I now do a 3-hour talk show out of my house, and I started upstairs, and I actually was kind of spread all over the house, and my wife kind of came to me and said, I have an idea. I said, what's that idea? She said, you need to pick one room, and then you'll be way more organized. Right now you're flying around all over the place, and you know, you're doing everything at the same time. And so we've been able to pick a room, and for 3 hours out of the day, I'm able to interview experts and cover COVID-19, and we've got 3 talk shows on Global News Radio 980 CFBL that do the same thing along with mine, and we do our best to keep everybody up to date locally, provincially, nationally. It's strange to think that you could take one topic, one story, and talk about it day after day and still find things to talk about those day after days, but it happens. And it's something that's impacting the world, and it's something that is changing minute by minute, and it's been unlike anything I have ever been through before, and I don't think any of us will be through it again.
Quick question. Which room is it that you're isolated to with the talk show?
You know what? The one that ends up working best, it's strange, the last little piece of our basement that isn't finished is the laundry room area, and with the insulation being there, and with a little corner with a couple of big pillows and a couple of quilts, it makes it pretty soundproof. So I'm stationed at a little table that's been there in our laundry room forever, and on one side is a washer and dryer in case I spill something on myself, and on the other side is the modem, and I plug right into that, and away we go, and so far so good.
A little bit more professional than me, I guess. So quick question, Mike. Let's just talk about something that's kind of intrigued me, and it's caught a lot of your fans, is your voice. Is it real? I mean, it's your stamp and signature, right?
It's the only one I've got, man.
It's very mesmerizing when you listen and you catch even your talk shows on 980 when you hear your passion in the voice and connecting with people, and even the hockey games. It's just so lively. And I just wondered if that was something that you honed, or if it was just natural, or where did that come from?
I think I get naturally excited to do a lot of different things in life, but certainly to do things on air, absolutely. And I think maybe that's where it comes from, because if we're sitting down and talking, you know, having dinner or lunch at a restaurant, I'm not going to be projecting as much as I would on the air, so maybe it's a little bit different. I always say that when somebody's on the radio or on TV, maybe on the radio a little bit more because more of your personality comes out, but if you're hosting a talk show, maybe that's the best way to say it.
Yeah.
If you're doing something like that, you are 99% you have to be, and you're 1% not you. And that 1% kind of comes in the fact that you have to push that outgoing personality just a little bit more. But if you're not 99% you, people are going to see through it. And so you've got to be yourself, and you've got to believe how you believe, and you've got to say what you want to say, and it's got to be genuine. And maybe the only 1% is just that little extra push of excitement for doing it. So that's probably where it comes from. And I think, you know what, if people like the sound of it, then I'm lucky, because I'm pretty lucky to wake up and do what I do.
Talking about the London Knights, do you know how symbolic you are to people with the Knights? Your voice.
You know what? I like to think of myself as a passenger. I'm really, really lucky to do what I do, and to be able to sit back and even be a vehicle. And maybe that's the other thing that kind of works into the role that I have. You're the vehicle to bring information or bring games on the radio and that sort of thing. Bring web stories to people, information about the team, and to be able to sit back and learn what I have from Dale and Mark Hunter and the rest of the organization, and watch what they've built and be any part of what they've achieved has just been phenomenal. I don't think even they could have ever dreamed what they have put together, because it kind of began from humble beginnings at the old London Ice House that really needed a new roof. And now they've got they've got 2 Memorial Cup championships. They have back-to-back OHL championships going back a few years. They've got 4 league championships, and the number of 40-win seasons and the number of victories overall. I mean, the numbers are staggering. So it's been a blast. It really has.
You know, I know because I see you around the rink. I've been up in the booth with you a few times when I've seen clients at games there for London and playing against London. Can you walk through typical day with you for preparing for a night's game quickly? Like, is there a routine, or is there anything that you do to get yourself ready for these home games?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing in it is research, and I think that's something that kind of has to be all the time, that you have to always be following what's going on. It's kind of like somebody saying, hey, I want to cover the San Francisco 49ers. I've never seen them play. Where should I begin?
Yeah.
And you would think, well, you probably want to go back and watch every game that they've played. It's so much easier if you've got that already in there. It's hard to say I'm going to cover sports and I haven't covered sports. In the case of doing a game, you know what? I'm blessed with a good short-term memory and not necessarily the greatest long-term memory, so I can load stuff in and then regurgitate it. And I used to do this in university, probably to a detriment now, because, you know, when we sit back and watch Jeopardy sometimes or whatever, and a history category comes up, because I took history in school, the kids will make fun of me because I remember 2 things from my entire history degree. One is that Minamoto no Yoritomo was an emperor in Japan, and I don't even know, maybe I'm down to one thing. I can't even remember what the other thing is. I think the Magna Carta. But I think I learned that from, Billy Madison. So I could load stuff in, and I did well in school, but I wasn't able to kind of retain it. So It almost works really well that I can take names and numbers and figures that change on a pretty regular basis, load them into my brain for a game, do the game, and then afterward I'd have to restudy probably, less than a day later in order to do the same game again. So that kind of thing just helps. But doing the research and kind of paying attention to what other people do as well. You're always looking, this day and age, you're always looking for new ways of doing things, and I'm always trying stuff. Some of the stuff, I don't know whether it works, I don't know whether it's annoying. You just kind of gauge the feedback. But one of the things I will now do is I'll record the game as it's going using Instagram, and then I'm able to catch some highlights, not all of them, but I can catch enough highlights, and with my voice going in toward the phone, it picks it up enough that it almost sounds like it's attached to it, and then I'll try and tweet that out as quickly as possible so that people who aren't able to see the game but might be wanting to pay attention to the game can at least get some of the highlights. So little things like that you're always looking to change and do. But a lot of it's just preparation. When you get to the rink, I usually get there about 2 hours early, and I'll already have things memorized. So I've already got in my head what the names and numbers of everybody happen to be, and then a piece of information usually on each guy, or a couple of pieces of information. Some of it you just know, other stuff maybe you've looked up in the last day or so, and then it's a matter of going, getting some interviews, planning out the pregame show that we do, whether it's an hour pregame show sometimes or a half-hour pregame show, and then you start that about a half hour before the game goes, just as warm-ups are kind of ending, and then you do the game. So it becomes pretty routine, and it but it's never boring, and it's always a blast. I would call play-by-play of whatever, marble racing. People are getting into marble racing during this. Sure, you want me to call marble racing? Whatever it is. That's all I've ever wanted to do.
That whole preparation and that whole excitement aspect of the play-by-play, how important is it to have a color guy or a partner there with you? Like, I know Jim's there with you. How important is that relationship?
I think it's fantastic. It's a must. You do games by yourself, and as soon as you do 2 minutes by yourself, you realize how important it is to have that partner with you. And I'm really lucky in that Jim and I are able to do most games together, and he balances a very full-time role in order to be able to do that. And how he does it sometimes, we've been able to get back from Sault Ste. Marie sometimes, and it'll be 4:30 in the morning, and he has an 8 o'clock class, and he's there, and he is able to do that end of things, and willing to sacrifice what it takes to do the job that he does. It's great to be able to have somebody to play off. You want someone who you have chemistry with, who you get along with. We're pretty blessed that way. So yeah, it's important because it helps you to tell the story and it helps to expand things. It's one thing to have somebody talking over and over and over. It's another thing to have somebody else who can take it in different directions. Or the other part of it is you've got the eyes of somebody else on the game. Because, we've got 2 referees and 2 linesmen in a game now, and I think it helps it. The guy who's calling the play of the game is going to be watching the puck a lot, whereas, the color analyst is able to kind of look in other areas and pick up other things, and it just enhances the information that you're giving. So I think it's absolutely key if it can be done, and that's tough. Sometimes financially it can't be done in some markets. But, again, there comes that word luck again. We're lucky to be able to do it in London.
Now, what's your favorite call? A big save or a big-time goal?
You know what? There's just moments. And it's not necessarily a goal or a save, but there will be games where you just have it. And it's coming easy, and it's sounding how you want it to sound, and you're building crescendos, and the game is flowing well. There could be a game that ends 3-2 in overtime, but it's a game where there just wasn't much flow to it. There's an exciting finish to it, but the overall product may not be there. So I love the moments when you've got a good quality game that's got a lot of good flow to it, and when everything's just clicking. That's the best.
So being around that club there with London, Mark and Dale, to fans, I mean, I know them, I deal with them, I know you deal with them. They can be larger than life to some of the fans that come in there because, they're good coaches, they're big figures in hockey. Is there any one story that you have that sticks with you about either one of those guys, Mark or Dale, over the years with the London Knights that kind of just sticks with you about those guys? Anything happening behind the scenes or in a big game?
Well, there'd be a few. We could sit back and tell those stories for a while, but I think what you need to appreciate is where they come from, and that they're 2 people who will never forget that. Their family structure is incredibly strong, and it begins with Dick Hunter and the values that they have, the values that they keep, their willingness, it's a selflessness almost, as much as they become these big figures, they want to help players develop. They want to help people develop. If you don't go on to become a National Hockey Leaguer, but you go on to become a success in whatever part of the world you want to go in, and they played a role in that, they take such pride in that. And I think the other thing that you need to look at is the risk that they took in starting and purchasing the London Knights. And I think because of what they have built. But when the team had just missed the playoffs, it was probably as close to an expansion team roster as you could find without it being an expansion team. There had been a lot of graduation. There were a lot of holes in it. And yet this is what they started with. And you had the London Ice House, who I had mentioned that had holes in the roof. When it would flood, they'd be the ones doing it. Mark always tells this story where they were about to practice in Rick Nash's first year, so that first year that they owned the team, and the ice hadn't been flooded, and he went back, and whoever was going to flood the ice had to go and get a part for something, because again, they were just trying to keep the place up and going. And Mark looked around, there was nobody to flood the ice, and so he hops on the ice resurfacing machine, and he heads out, and he says he'll never forget looking over, and there's his first round pick, Rick Nash, who he knew at that point was going to have a great NHL career, staring through the glass at him as his general manager floods the ice so they could practice. But that's what they're willing to do. It's whatever it takes. And that's kind of a thing throughout the organization where everybody pitches in, and you are never too big or too small for a role. And that's one of those big ingredients to their success that I don't think gets enough. It doesn't get enough notoriety.
That background of where they came from your explanation of the arenas, the poor building they were in, and now they're in the new facility, and they came from that and went to Memorial Cups. And speaking of Memorial Cups, what is it like calling those games and calling some of the biggest plays in Knights history books for those Memorial Cups?
Yeah, that's a privilege right there. That's what it absolutely is. And they were two different championships in that you had what is now known as the team of the century, and this was a team that, again, that quality of Mark and Dale just seemed to be there throughout them, because they went 31 games without losing at the beginning of the year. But we've beaten some teams twice. Nobody ever thought that. I can't remember a moment when they may have even exhaled a little bit until we were on our way back from Ottawa. We were actually chartering back because I think the game was the next day or whatever it is. So we drove to the airport, and they had just taken a 3-1 lead in the series. And finally, I think they could sense it, that, you know what, we can win one of the next 3 games and win this championship and make it to the Memorial Cup. And there was finally that little bit of, I think this is possible. And you think about how far into that season that was. They played an entire 68 games, and they had lost 7 times. And they had lost twice in the playoffs, and that's it. And yet that's the first moment when you could finally sense, these guys can do it. And then even getting into the Memorial Cup that year. And again, this is the team of the century, the best team that has ever been put together in junior hockey, and it was named that last year. When they started that Memorial Cup, that first game that they played against Sidney Crosby and Rimouski, I still think is the best hockey game I've ever seen. And it ended 4-3 in overtime. Mark Mathot, who never scored goals, scored twice, including the overtime winner, and it just had everything you wanted. But Dylan Hunter tells a great story about it. He said he can remember all of the guys are kind of in the room saying, how good is Rimouski? They've made it here, and they had been on a big winning streak, and they had Sidney Crosby. And he says the puck drops, and the puck goes to Sidney Crosby. He toe drags their best defenseman, fires a pass across the ice, and Rimouski rings one off the crossbar. And they just went, whoa, where are we? And Rimouski went up 3-1 in that game, I think at the end of the first period, and the Knights fought back. And so that was just, they never took anything for granted, even up to that final game where they did win it 4-0, because you give Dale Hunter 2 cracks at the team, and he's going to have some things that they have to overcome. And you know what? He won the coaching battle that day for sure. And I guess it was remarkable to see how humble that team remained all year. And then the Knights, who won in 2016, this was a team that, again, brought in Matthew Tkachuk. Mitch Marner and Christian Dvorak were older players and in a position where this was a good time for them to compete. But there was nothing that suggested this was the team. This was a team that's going to win 17 straight playoff and Memorial Cup games. Nothing ever suggested that. You never even felt that, because again, that humble nature was there, and Matthew Tkachuk was maybe a bigger presence on that team than I think he gets credit for. He was tremendous in terms of a leader that didn't have to be a leader. Their leadership worked so well. They had co-captains in Mitch Marner and Christian Dvorak. Dvorak never said anything, led by example. Mitch said everything and was just an absolutely electric spark plug on the ice. And they were down 2-1 to Owen Sound in the first round, and you would think, well, here they go. That's it. And then they reeled off a couple of wins, and next thing you knew, they started that 17-game run that ended in a Memorial Cup overtime victory in which Tkachuk and Dvorak kind of combined on the winner. Matthew Tkachuk's name reads beside the goal, but if you talk to them, they'll admit, it went off Dvorak, but he wasn't going to let anybody know. He didn't want that changed. He just wanted to win, and they did.
I remember that series clearly, and I mean, actually, both of those teams that you spoke about with Rick Nash and even your 2016 team was loaded with players on both teams. And during these years, though, like, is there any particular nights or 2 or 3 players of all time in history that you've seen that have actually stood out, or you remember watching them play and why they were so special to you, or what you noticed out of those couple players?
Yeah, that's a tough one, because there are so many, and so many for different reasons. You know, the Knights have done such a good job drafting character guys, and in they come, and you know, the blueprint is there.
Yeah.
And if you want to be a professional hockey player, or you want to excel and succeed, here's what you've got to do. And if you stop and listen, then that's exactly what you're going to find out while you're a member of the Knights organization. So, I don't know, 1 or 2 guys. Matthew Tkachuk would just do things. Matthew Tkachuk stands out because, you know, he had these words, and they're the 3 C's, and for whatever reason, I can never completely remember them, but character, compete, character, compete, and it's not charisma, because that's the one that always throws me off.
I was thinking composure, staying composed on the ice.
Yeah, it could be composure, but whatever it is. And, you know, here's kind of Matthew Tkachuk in a nutshell, and in the things that he's able to do. You name it, he can do it. And he's got those 3 words, and he's doing an interview nationally at center ice with Mitch Marner and Christian Dvorak. The 3 of them are standing there because they were kind of the line that year. And they're doing this interview, and Matthew Tkachuk has told his teammates that he's going to fit all of his words into this interview. So you can't see it on camera, but you've got basically every other member of the London Knights team, every other player lined up around the circle of center ice where they're recording this interview. And Matthew Tkachuk worked in all 3 words into that interview just because he can. Yeah. You know, you name it, he can do it. And he was just one of those guys that even as a grown adult, you would go, hey, if this guy asked me to do something, I would do it. I wouldn't ask a question, because I know that's what needed to be done. And that's just what he has in him.
Yeah, a leader and a character guy for sure, eh?
Oh, unbelievable.
So, over the years, who's given you the best interviews, the most colorful guys from the Knights? There's got to be 1 or 2 entertainers, right? There always is.
Oh, yeah. Robbie Schremp was always a great guy to interview about anything, because, you know, it could go in all kinds of different directions. One of the most recent ones, I mean, we had a ton of fun with Colin Martin, with Matt and Ryan Rupert, but one of the most recent ones, Marcus Phillips. I wish the year had gone on, because Marcus Phillips is just such a dynamite guy, and somebody who, you know, we would create things. This was Jim Van Horn and Marcus's idea, but it became Stump Marcus. And they would kind of go through things, and they would bring up, I think they brought up the year Dale Hunter was drafted into the OHL, and Marcus is rhyming off names, but he has that ability. Maybe, you know, he'd have to go and look that up like the rest of us, but he just loves the game and knows so much about it, and he was an absolute blast this year. And but yeah, there's a lot of guys we've had some fun with.
Off the ice is as important as on the ice for the London Knights and the Hunters. And do you recall any certain players that had a huge impact in the community of London, or I guess the whole organization is pretty good in general as far as community aspect as a team?
It really is. And that was something that, again, Markendale, when they purchased the team, they knew how important that was. And they would say to the guys, look, you're going to develop a status in this community. And you're going to be able to put some smiles on some faces, and let's make sure we do that. And so, whether it is school visits, whether it's hospital visits, you name it. I mean, they've got that program going all the time, and the number of smiles they've been able to put on faces. Because in London, it's a big town for a junior hockey town, because you're looking at pushing 400,000 plus the surrounding area. So you're bigger than a town that has 75,000 people or 100,000 people, and so the following maybe is just a little bit bigger, but you're not too big. So you're still people are still willing to say, hey, we are a proud junior hockey town. It doesn't get overrun by, well, there's NHL teams nearby and they kind of get top billing. It's not like that. So they do have kind of that real star status, and the players come to appreciate it and know how powerful it can be. And you look at the number of times Max Domi in behind the scenes, and it's this is the other thing. There are so many players. I mentioned the good character. There are so many players who aren't in it to say, hey, I'm going to do this, and then we'll, have a big post on Instagram, and, I'll get a whole bunch of likes and things like that. It's not like that. The number of things that they're doing behind the scenes that don't even get noticed by anybody but maybe an 8-year-old child, in Max's case with diabetes, and his parents, and that's it. And I mentioned Max, but we could mention all kinds of guys doing similar things. Mitch Marner would do so many things, behind the scenes for different kids, and it's not for, hey, look what I'm doing. It's hey, this is going to brighten somebody's day. This is going to mean something to somebody, and they come to realize that, and they kind of make it happen.
So the NHL. Are we ever going to hear it from you or see it, or?
I'm old. That's I'm probably too old for something like that right now. But I worked for a couple of years with the Calgary Flames, and it was a blast. I've met so many amazing people. I wouldn't change it for the world. When we started having a family, we had a decision to make. Which direction do we want to go? And I've kind of been able to have a best of both worlds, where you get to realize how much travel there is. I remember talking with a trainer with the Calgary Flames, and this is as we were trying to have our first child, and that trainer was counting up the number of days that he hadn't been home to see his family, and it was a big number. And so you had to think, okay, how much am I going to miss if this is a path that I want to pursue? And in junior hockey, it kind of gives you the best of both worlds, where, yeah, there is a lot of traveling. Yeah, you're away, but you don't have to go in the night before. So a lot of times you go in same day. I think with the nights, we're pretty fortunate. We might spend 9 nights in a hotel the entire year, and yet you still get to do games, and you still, the way that my work schedule worked away from hockey and in doing radio shows and things like that. When the kids were young, I didn't leave for work until 12:30, and I was home about 7. So I never missed anything. I didn't miss picking them up from nursery school or any of those things, and maybe dinner was a little later, but we developed that routine, and you were always there to put them to bed unless there was a game. So that kind of stuff was important to me. Yeah. And I would do play-by-play of, like I said, anything. I'm more than fortunate, and I don't know how I've lucked out how I have, but to do it, where I do it and how I'm able to do it. So yeah, it was one of those things where I had a terrific NHL experience. It was a couple of years long, and now I get to sit back and watch a lot of guys who have come through the junior ranks go on excel at that level, and I find that really enjoyable to see that side of their success. It's tremendous. You can't watch too many NHL games nowadays without seeing at least one former London Knight or a London native, and that's pretty special.
I'm going to wrap things up here with just want to play a little quick game with you, almost like the Jigsaw character from the movie Saw. So, 10.
Do I have to put a chain on my leg or anything like that? Are you going to bury a key in my stomach?
No chains, no clocks, no door handles, none of that stuff.
Okay, good.
Just 10 of the fastest answers about Mike Stubbs. Favorite food? Lasagna, perfect. Favorite band or album?
Gotta go Pearl Jam 10.
Oh, saw Pearl Jam twice. I'm glad we're of the same era and genre. I really like it. If you weren't in radio, what would you be doing?
I hope teaching.
Teaching. Interesting. You sound to me like you're a history guy.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I took history and played at the radio station and kind of got to do a lot of play-by-play at CHRW in Western. So that kind of is where the history degree came from. So I don't know what I teach a little bit of Fanshawe right now, and it's an absolute blast. So
Good.
I would say teaching.
LeBron James or Michael Jordan?
I love watching both of them. I got to go Michael Jordan just because I'm old, and Michael Jordan is the era I watched, and too many good memories of watching Michael Jordan play to not say Michael Jordan.
Outstanding basketball player. Favorite NHL team?
That's a tough one. I grew up a Montreal fan. I worked for the Calgary Flames, and right now I really only cheer for one team. Can I say what that team is?
You sure can.
The Cincinnati Bengals. That's the only team I cheer for. Otherwise, I'm just kind of watching players and watching games.
At least you're not a Browns fan.
Not a Browns fan. Is a Bengals fan better?
Jeez, I don't know. But I wouldn't want to be either one, to be honest with you. But cat or dog?
Dogs growing up, but when I had to choose an animal when I was living on my own, cats, and we've had cats ever since. So I'm a cat guy.
Pineapple on pizza?
Sure.
All right. Alexa or Google Home?
We own Alexa, so I got to go Alexa.
Coffee or tea?
I do both, and I drink both probably as much as the other. So can I go both?
You can go both. Morning person or night owl?
I go through different swings where I'll be up really early. I love as I get older. Morning person, because I get way more done. I saw Mark Wahlberg's schedule one day where he gets up at like 4. I won't get up at 4 because I think that messes with your circadian rhythms and whatever clocks you have, internal clocks. But if I can get up early, I get a lot done, and I find a much more fulfilled day. So used to be a night person, now a morning person.
Favorite subject in school?
I didn't mind school. I'd probably go history, although as much as I was a history major, I do remember in Mr. Shakel's grade 11 history class, the first test I took, I got 0 out of 40. And that's when I realized that you did have to study. And that kind of changed me right there. So I thank him for giving me a 0. Somehow I went on and took that same subject to a greater degree in university. I enjoyed the history side of it, so I'll have to go with that.
Does My Pillow make a difference?
You know what? I do have them on the bed, and I just like pillows, period. If I can have a ton of pillows around me, I have a good sleep. Any kind of pillow, I'm in.
Gotta have a ton of pillows on the bed, so.
That's it.
So, Mike, I appreciate you being first guest on my podcast here. I love it. And as soon as we get out of this virus situation, I look forward to seeing you again at the rink when the nights start back up.
Can't wait, Chris, and thanks again. This has been a lot of fun. Thanks for having me.
Awesome, bud. We'll chat later.
Sounds good.